An urgent plea for food, stamped most immediate, was sent from starving Bengal to the very heart of the British war machine. But relief never came. Instead, grain-laden ships sailed past Indian shores as ration cards in Calcutta became death sentences. While Churchill's government stockpiled for Europe, millions in his own empire perished by design, not disaster. Why did British leaders turn famine into a weapon, and how far were they willing to go to keep this buried? In May 1942, the governor of Bengal issued a circular to every district magistrate along the coast. The order was blunt. All country boats capable of carrying more than 10 people were to be confiscated, immobilized, or destroyed. Officially, this was a wartime precaution meant to keep boats out of Japanese hands if an invasion came from Burma. In practice, it tore out the arteries of Bengal's food system overnight. Villages that had always moved rice, fish, and labor by river found themselves stranded. Registers filled with the names of boat owners and their seized craft, thousands in Midnapore, Khulna, Bakkarganj. Some boats were dragged onto embankments and left to rot. Others were burned or sunk under military supervision. The rules did not stop at boats. Bullock carts, wagons, even bicycles were requisitioned in some areas, further isolating rural communities. A district magistrate's report from 1942 describes the aftermath. The market is paralyzed. Rice cannot reach the towns. The poor cannot travel for work or relief. With the rivers locked down, surplus grain piled up in some pockets while famine spread in others. Fishers and ferrymen lost their livelihoods. Traders stopped lending credit, afraid that government agents would seize their cargo or their means of transport without warning. The denial policy was enforced with lists and ledgers. Boats registered, villages mapped, confiscations logged. But beneath the bureaucracy, a human disaster was taking shape. Bengal's food could no longer move. By the time later relief shipments arrived, the web of local trade had already collapsed. The first link in the chain was not a storm or a blight, but an official order, stamped and dispatched from Calcutta, that severed the province's lifeline. While Bengal's markets seized and boats lay stranded, the War Cabinet in London reviewed grain requests from its colony. In June 1943, the government of India cabled a desperate appeal. 1 million tons of wheat and rice were needed to avert catastrophe. The reply from London was clinical. Allocations would fall far short. Cabinet tables from that summer show India's request slashed to a fraction. Instead, ships loaded with Australian wheat, Canadian flour, and Iraqi barley charted courses toward Britain, the Middle East, and North Africa. Grain convoys skirted the Indian coast, their holds sealed, bound for imperial stockpiles and military reserves. Official manifests from August 1943 recorded 70,000 tons of rice exported out of India, much of it destined for British consumption, even as Bengal's death toll climbed. The War Transport Office listed priorities: feeding the British home front, sustaining Allied garrisons, and building up reserves for future campaigns. Relief for Bengal was a distant concern, buried in footnotes and rationing schedules. Internal memoranda reveal a hierarchy of need: British civilians, Allied troops, and then colonial subjects. London's officials weighed the numbers on paper, tonnage, shipping days, estimated losses, while famine spread in Bengal's villages. The Ministry of Food's own ledgers showed that, even at the crisis peak, India was a net exporter of rice. The logic was imperial. Food flowed to where the war demanded, not where the hungry pleaded. Bengal's pleas for imports met the cold arithmetic of empire. The famine's scale was not dictated by drought or harvest alone, but by allocation, by the routes ships sailed, and the destinations written in the ledgers of distant men. Convoy records from the summer of 1943 tell a story that official statements tried to hide. While the British War Cabinet claimed there were no ships to spare for Bengal, Admiralty logs show otherwise. Convoy US-31 departed Fremantle in July, its holds packed with Australian wheat. The ships, Empire Star, City of Paris and Samaria, sailed across the Indian Ocean, passing within reach of Bombay and Calcutta. Not a single sack was unloaded for famine relief. Their manifests listed final destinations: Suez, Port Said, Liverpool. Another convoy, SL-125, left Freetown for Britain with Canadian flour, bypassing starving India entirely. Ministry of War transport schedules from August show 40,000 tons of wheat assigned to British Home Reserves, while Indian requests for emergency imports were deferred. Cargo lists detail the tonnage: 7,200 tons aboard Empire Star, 6,800 on City of Paris, 5,000 on Samaria. Each ship's logbook records the route, past the subcontinent, straight through the Bay of Bengal, then west toward the Suez Canal. At the same time, the Government of India's appeal for 1 million tons of grain sat unanswered in London's files. Evidence is not just in numbers, but in the routes themselves. Grain ships, protected by Royal Navy escorts, sailed through the very waters where famine was taking lives by the hour. The official rationale, shipping crisis and submarine threat, collapses under the weight of these logs. The ships were there, the food was there, the decisions about where it would go were made far from Bengal. What reached India was not relief, but silence as the convoys steamed past, their cargoes bound for other shores. The order arrived from New Delhi in June 1943, stamped confidential and signed in blue pencil by the Home Department's press advisor. Every major newspaper in British India, from Calcutta to Lahore, received the same instructions. Editors were told to submit all coverage of the Bengal food situation for pre-publication scrutiny. The circular's wording was precise. Reports that could impair the war effort or lower public morale were forbidden. The term famine was not to appear in print. Journalists were directed to use phrases like food difficulties or shortage instead. Descriptions of mass death, starvation, or bodies in the streets were to be excised. Photographs showing emaciated figures, children with distended bellies, or the dead by the roadside were strictly prohibited. The directive listed banned terms in a clipped, bureaucratic style: starvation, famine, mass deaths, hunger marches, food riots, skeleton-like corpses in the streets. Editors who defied the order faced prosecution under the Defence of India rules, which allowed for fines, suspension of publication, or even imprisonment. The press censor in Calcutta enforced the rules with daily visits to the offices of the Statesman, Amrita Bazar Patrika, and other papers. Copy was reviewed, paragraphs struck through, headlines rewritten. Letters from provincial censors to editors warned against alarmist or sensational language, reminding them that the maintenance of public confidence is essential to the war effort. The censorship regime extended beyond the English-language press. Vernacular papers in Bengali, Urdu and Hindi received the same circular, often with handwritten notes from district magistrates emphasizing compliance. Telegrams from the Home Department instructed local censors to monitor not just news articles but also letters to the editor, advertisements, and even obituaries. Reports of food riots or market panic were routinely spiked. Regional correspondents learned to self-censor, omitting details of hunger, disease and death in their dispatches. Behind the scenes, the Press Information Bureau compiled weekly digests of permitted famine news, statements from government spokesmen, appeals for charity, reassurances that relief was on its way. Editors who pressed for permission to publish eyewitness accounts met with silence or formal rebuke. The official line was that the food shortage was under control, that no panic was warranted, and that any suggestion to the contrary would aid enemy propaganda. Control was the message. The signature at the bottom of the circular, often initialed by the chief press censor, became a symbol of the information blackout. District magistrates forwarded compliance reports to New Delhi, confirming that the press had cooperated fully and that no unauthorized stories had appeared. In the months that followed, the public picture of Bengal's crisis was filtered through carefully managed statements, stripped of the scale and horror unfolding on the ground. The blackout was not accidental. It was written, signed, and enforced, one more layer of control in a system determined to keep the truth from reaching the world. Late in August 1943, the silence began to fracture. The Statesman, a leading English-language daily in Calcutta, published a series of photographs showing the dying and the dead on the city's streets. The images were stark. Children with limbs like sticks, men collapsed on tram lines, women sprawled on the pavement, eyes open but unseeing. These photographs, first released on August 22nd, broke through months of enforced quiet. For many in India and abroad, they offered the first undeniable proof of what government censors had tried to keep invisible. Inside the offices of the Statesman, the decision to print these pictures was not taken lightly. For weeks, editors had faced pressure from the press censor's office to avoid anything that might impair morale or aid enemy propaganda. The Home Department's earlier circular still hung over every newsroom. The word famine was forbidden, stories of mass death were to be excised, and any hint of panic was to be crushed before it reached print. But by late August, the scale of suffering could no longer be contained by official language. The Statesman's editor, Ian Stevens, wrote that the truth had become unpublishable by order, but undeniable by sight. The publication of these images sent a shockwave through official channels. Telegrams flew between Calcutta and New Delhi, and then on to London. Within days, the government of India issued a confidential memo to all provincial authorities. The line was clear: blame for the crisis would be placed on local hoarding, black marketeers, and the supposed failings of Indian administrators. One memo circulated by the Ministry of Food insisted that the principal cause of scarcity is the holding back of stocks by unscrupulous persons. The language shifted. Starvation was now framed as a consequence of moral weakness, not policy or allocation. This new narrative was rapidly adopted in official statements. Ministers and press officers began to stress that the famine was exaggerated by panic buying and artificial scarcity. The Statesman's photographs were described in one government note as unhelpful to the war effort and liable to mislead the public. In Parliament, questions about Bengal were brushed aside with references to market irregularities and the necessity of discipline in time of war. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was acknowledged. Internal correspondence from late August shows senior officials warning that the crisis could no longer be kept out of sight. Yet, rather than admit to failures in relief or the diversion of food, authorities doubled down on the rhetoric of blame. The hoarding blame memo, circulated in late August and early September, became the template for all subsequent public explanations. Even as the world began to see the faces of famine, the official line remained rigid. The suffering was the work of profiteers and panic, not policy. The breach in censorship did not bring transparency, it triggered a campaign of deflection. The Statesman's editor would later recall that the only thing more chilling than the silence was the speed with which the machinery of blame snapped into place. The photographs could not be unseen, but the story they told was quickly rewritten by those in power. The momentary exposure of truth became, in the hands of officials, another opportunity to protect the reputation of empire. Winston Churchill sat at the center of power, surrounded by cables and reports from across the empire. In the midst of Bengal's agony, a message landed on his desk from Leopold Amery, Secretary of State for India, describing the dead and dying in Calcutta's streets. Churchill's response was short, but the words left a stain that no later apology could wash away. He asked Amery, "Why hasn't Gandhi died yet?" The exchange is preserved in Amery's diary, dated August 1943, catalogued as Amery Papers, Churchill Archives Centre, Amel 2180. The Prime Minister's comment came not as a joke, but as a retort to news of mass starvation. There was no hesitation, no hint of empathy, only a sneer at a political enemy, and by extension, at the millions who were suffering. The file sits in the archives, a thin volume among thousands, but the words are heavy. Why hasn't Gandhi died yet? This was not a stray remark. It came at the height of the famine, in the middle of repeated pleas for grain and relief. Churchill's language, captured in a private record, echoed the tone of official cable traffic, cold, dismissive, and untouched by the scale of disaster. The contempt in that line was not hidden in code or euphemism. It was written plainly, in the hand of a man deciding who would eat and who would not. The record remains unredacted for anyone willing to look. Leopold Amery's diary, dated August 1943, offers a rare glimpse behind the locked doors of Whitehall. The Secretary of State for India, a man not known for sentiment, wrote in measured lines about his frustration with the Prime Minister. The famine in Bengal had become impossible to ignore. Reports of the dead in Calcutta, the relentless appeals from Indian officials, and the rising death toll were all laid out before the War Cabinet. Yet Amery noted a chilling absence, no urgency, no outrage, just the casual indifference of men far removed from the consequences of their decisions. Amery's private notes reveal more than a single cruel remark. They document a pattern of dismissal, a leadership unmoved by the scale of suffering. He recorded how, when confronted with news of mass starvation, Churchill responded not with concern, but with scorn. Amery described the Prime Minister's attitude as one of startling insensitivity, observing that Churchill seemed more interested in political maneuvering than in the fate of millions. The diary entry, preserved among the Amery papers at the Churchill Archives Centre, stands as a written acknowledgement that the highest levels of government knew what was happening and chose to look away. Amery's words carry the weight of a witness forced to watch disaster unfold in slow motion. He chronicled how pleas for relief were met with bureaucratic delay, how the machinery of empire turned human tragedy into a matter of paperwork. The indifference was not hidden. It was discussed around the cabinet table, written into memoranda, and, in Amery's own hand, captured in lines that still echo decades later. In August 1943, as famine raged in Bengal, the men in charge understood the cost and accepted it. Today, governments still decide who eats and who waits, often behind closed doors. Food remains a tool of power, not just survival. When strategy outweighs humanity, the line between policy and atrocity blurs. The past isn't buried, it is echoed every time a life is weighed against a ledger. History remembers the numbers. It is up to us to remember the faces. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.